It's not our fault that we Muslims believe in family values. We believe in starting up families at an early age, just like you used to. The British people at one point used to do this. It is not our fault. It is not our fault that you have left your churches empty to be converted to restaurants. It's not our fault that you only go to church on a Sunday where we go to the mosque 5 times a day.
I didn't say Muslim people could be contained. I said the Islamo-populist movement represented by shysters like you could be contained.
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV. Today we're going to be talking about the Muslim vote. There are 4 million Muslims in Britain, and this year in the local elections they were hugely significant as a voting bloc. Now, what are the issues they care about? Is it just Gaza, or are there wider domestic policies that matter to them? To discuss this, I'm joined by Andrew Gilligan, a senior fellow at Policy Exchange, who has also just released a report about Islamopopulism. And I'm also delighted to be joined by campaigner Shakeel Afsar, who is based in Birmingham. Thank you both for joining me. Now, Andrew, I want to go to you first, and I'd love to hear about your report and what you've coined as Islamopopulism. How significant is the Muslim vote in Britain in British politics today?
Well, there are 4 million Muslims, as you said. That's a big growth. There are only 2.7 million in 2011. Population of Muslims grew by 44% in 10 years in this country. As you said, they were kind of 80% Labour in 2019. By this week, according to our polling, that's down to 30% for Labour. Labour's still the largest party, but only just. And there's been a massive move away from Labour to populist candidates. So, like there's been a move away to populist candidates by everyone. You know, obviously we've seen a growth of left populism in the Greens, we've seen a growth of right populism in Reform, and we've also seen a growth of Muslim populism in these independent candidates who won, of course, 4 seats at the 2024 general election. They probably won more than 100 seats at these council elections we've just had. The Muslim Vote's policy platform, they've got 18 policy demands, of which 6 are about Israel and Gaza, and almost all the others are just entirely communal. So the things like, you know, allowing prayer in schools, doing an Islamophobia definition, dismantling Prevent, the counter-terrorism program. There's only one of the 18 demands that's actually related to the issues which most Brits and most British Muslims say is their top priority.
And is Islamopopulism a problem in Britain?
Well, look, you might argue that it's just like, you know, people organising in a civic way through the democratic system to advance their interests, as many other groups have done before them. Some of them are respectable enough, but quite a lot of them are seriously worrying. Like I say, the policy platform they've got bears no resemblance to the needs or demands of the country as a whole, and it doesn't really even align with the needs and demands of British Muslims. So British Muslims, it's true that British Muslims are more interested in Gaza and Palestine than the average voter, but it's still not a massive priority for them. So again, we did this polling just before the election. Only 25% of British Muslims put Gaza and Palestine in their top 3 issues. And there was similar polling before the 2024 general election. Only 44% of British Muslims put Gaza and Palestine in their top 5. Their main priorities are basically, Muslim voters' main priorities are the same as the priorities of voters everywhere. You know, the cost of living is the top one, the economy, the environment, education, healthcare. And you find that the Muslim independents talk very, very little about those things. And in some cases, you know, not at all. I don't think there was even a manifesto, for instance, for quite a lot of the Islamopopulist groups that fought the local elections. And it seems to me that Muslim voters are in danger of kind of like voting themselves into a ghetto where they've got these explicitly communist candidates representing them, elected on a very narrow range of quite extreme policies. And none of the mainstream parties are going to owe much to Muslim voters, and none of the mainstream parties are going to want to work with them.
Yeah, Shakeel, what do you think about that? Do you think Muslims are voting themselves into a ghetto, as Andrew said?
Well, I'd just like to add, what Andrew said in regards to the statistics of Labour since 2019. It was actually in 2019 when Shakeel I ran a 5-day High Court trial protecting Jewish Christian, and Muslim children. These were people of Abrahamic faith who were being indoctrinated in schools. And there was no Gaza movement at that time. There was no, it was a parental movement. And to be quite frank with Mr. Gilligan, I think he's conflating advocacy for Muslim communities with Islamo-populism. Those are not the same thing. The funny thing is that when people advocate for other ethnic minorities or religious communities, it's often called civil rights and representation. But when Muslims do it, it suddenly gets framed into Islamo-populism. It's not my fault that we are advocating concerns of Muslims, because majority of the community that we are growing up in the inner city areas, is ethnic minorities and is Muslim. So, and to suggest that we're only using the Muslim or the Islamic card is absolutely absurd. One of our candidates was a Jewish gentleman. We had another candidate in North Edgbaston who was a atheist. We had another candidate who, wasn't from the LGBT community. So, and yes, the Gaza issue is a burning issue, not only to Muslims. If you look at the Gaza protests, you will find more non-Muslims at those protests than you will find people from, the Muslim subcontinent. So I haven't read Mr. Gilligan's report yet, but to suggest that we're kind of mobilizing on the back that, we're pure Muslims and we have to go against the elites, absolutely not. We are the communities who are suffering on the brunt end of the bin strike issues. We are the community who have the largest, Birmingham has the largest child poverty in whole of United Kingdom. It's our communities. To suggest that we're trying to advocate for votes based on international issues, it doesn't make sense. Yes, I do believe national politics are linked with local politics, and people might disagree with me, but I do believe that, because that was the sole reason Labour has been ousted. And this is not only to move away from mainstream parties, it was kind of to give Labour a kick in the backside to say, you have to change what you're doing. They unfortunately in 2019 made us politically homeless and now are bearing the fruits of
I've looked at your co-leader Ahmed Yaqub's Instagram account for 6 weeks during the election campaign, and he posted 70 posts. He posted or reposted 70 posts on Israel, Palestine, and Iran, and 6 posts on local issues. There isn't, as far as I can see, a manifesto of any kind. I think you had a couple of pledges on your leaflets, but I didn't see any kind of manifesto for local issues issued. And the campaign was very plainly about very communal issues. And of course, the circumstances are pretty favourable to you guys in Birmingham because the council's a mess. The bins haven't been collected for a year, but you haven't got any solutions for those problems. You've just got, quite a lot of rhetoric about Zionists and things like that.
Mr. Gilligan, I have to disagree with you, because we have got rhetorics, and I think you might have missed that in your research and in your write-up. Because the fact that we have been arguing, when people ask us what would we do different, we would the fact that the Birmingham City Council has mismanaged the council for the last 14 years. We had an athletes' village that was cost around £500 million, and not one athlete lived there, and it was sold off, I think, for £150 million. We had the Oracle system that the budget was so small, and the budget's in excess of hundreds of millions of pounds at the moment. Even the bin strike issue, even the equal pay dispute that we had, bought the Birmingham City Council and distributed. So for you to suggest that we are asking people to vote for us based on foreign issues and not local issues is absolutely not correct. Because yes, our communities are worried about foreign issues. And I'll tell you exactly why. Because when the Labour Party and the likes of Keir Starmer are in bed with the Israeli establishment, are sending funds away to Ukraine while we have homeless people sleeping here, are funding the Israeli apartheid state with drones that are being manufactured here, quite rightly, we are going to bring up the Gaza issue, because the Gaza issue is directly involved with local issues. Because if we weren't sending the money to Ukraine and we weren't sending the money to Israel, then that money would be kept here.
That's just not true, though, is it? And let me just quote from one of your. I mean, the amount of money we send to Israel is tiny. Let me just quote from one of Ahmed Yaqub's own videos during the election.
I can't look. With all due respect, I'm happy for you to quote anything off my page, but Ahmed Yaqub is big enough and ugly enough to speak for him. To speak for himself, and it'd be unfair for you to make me speak on behalf of him. I'm happy for you to quote anything from my page, because it's Shakeel Afsar you're talking to here,
let
not
me quote
Ahmed
something
Yaqub.
from you then. You say that attacks on you come from, quote, certain individuals have been funded by the Zionist establishment. What do you mean by that?
Well, we can see how many Labour MPs have been given donations by certain organizations. We can see how the Israeli establishment moves and shakes certain individuals. The fact that Keir Starmer, somebody who my community indigenously voted for, was comfortable to sit on a stage on LBC and say that the Palestinians, Muslims, it's okay for Israel to deprive them of water, electricity, and food. So, if what's the pressure? Why would Keir Starmer, knowing full well that he'd have a city called Birmingham, turn his back on him like they have done, and like we've proven that we will not allow that? Of course, it has, because if Keir Starmer is willing to go and say these things, then what's making him say that? Because it's absurd. Because even to the point where he just suggested something about the Bengali community, the Bengali, like they should be returned. So I can't quote it. The fact that who's making him say these things? If it doesn't look like there's a lobby at play, what does it look like, Mr. Gilligan?
Let me quote you something else you said then. This is an interview you gave to Press TV, the Iran state TV channel, in February. You said, as a British taxpayer, I want us to fund the Palestinians. I want us to give them weapons, guns, missiles, and allow them to liberate themselves against their occupiers. People ask me, do you support Hamas? My answer is, I support the right of Palestinians to bear arms to defend themselves against the occupiers. So you're saying here that British taxpayers should fund Hamas?
Can I clarify? So under international law, any country that is being occupied by an occupier has the right to bear arms to defend itself. I find it very funny, Mr. Gilligan, that you are sitting here asking me why I'm talking about international law, but the fact that you're not mentioning why were we funding Ukraine? Why was BBC and ITV News showing us how the Ukrainians are making Molotov cocktails and how Mr. Zelensky comes here with his pot begging for money? Why are we giving them money? Is it because the Palestinians are brown and the Ukrainians are white? I can't understand. I can't understand your logic, because I will reaffirm my position. I believe that if we are going to fund countries like Ukraine to fight against Russian aggression, we must fund countries like Palestine to fight against Israeli aggression. Why the double standard,
I'm just trying to
sir?
establish here that you have taught rather a lot about Zionism rather than local issues.
No, but let's pinpoint it back to you said. Also, in regards to Hamas, of course, I do not support any proscribed terrorist organization. That would be absurd. But I do support the rights of Palestinians. One second, Mr. Gilligan, I will give you a chance. I do support the right of Palestinians to bear arms, M16s, grenades, tanks, jet planes, the same way that we are providing Ukraine to fight against Russian aggression. What could I put a question back to you? Is it okay for us to fund the Ukrainians and teach them how to make Molotov cocktails to fight Russian aggression? And would that same apply to Palestinians who quite rightly are occupied state? Israel is occupying them, which is accepted by international law. Amnesty International has said that there's a plausible genocide. Would you say that we should be funding them as British taxpayers?
What happened in Ukraine was the invasion of a sovereign country by another country. What happened on October the 7th, for instance, in Israel?
No, go prior to that. What happened to go prior to October 7th? It never started October 7th, sir. Talk about 1947, 1948. Let's talk about that.
I'm trying to argue here that you're not that interested in local issues. You want to talk about Gaza and Palestine, and you're proving my point here.
No. I disagree, because I do want to talk about local issues, because it was me who started his political career by talking about local issues, which was parents who were Jewish parents, who were Christian parents, who did not want their children to learn about complex sexual relationships at such a young, tender age, and more importantly, without age appropriateness and parental involvement. So my whole political career has started by a local issue.
Let's talk about that then. So that you were in fact banned by the High Court from doing those demonstrations. The judge said that your protests were, quote, intimidating and frightening.
I wasn't banned. Injunction was a restriction for location was changed. I can go and protest right now if I like. I wasn't banned.
The judge also said the demonstrators, you, quote, misrepresented, sometimes grossly misrepresented what was being taught at those schools. And there was a former senior prosecutor, Natasha Feroze, who's a Muslim. He was brought in to mediate, and he said the protests were, quote, false, malicious, and disgraceful. And if that's the kind of local issue campaigning you want to do, God help Birmingham.
Mr. Nazir Afzal interfered, and which we quite rightfully respected and accepted. He asked us to make some sort of, understanding mutual arrangement with the school, which we did, and it's all on file. I will send it to the Spectator. Mr. Nazir Afzal asked us to suspend protests for 4 days on the basis that he would rectify the issue, the fact that parents would be allowed to come into the school, look at material that their children are providing. After 4 days, Mr. Nazir Afzal completely ignored all the parents that he was claiming to advocate for. He and point blankly, he didn't even give any reason as to why, and then went on to TV and Sky News to try to say that the parents don't agree. I'm happy to go around the Spectator in any part of Birmingham, whether even in areas like King's Standing, where reform has won, and ask those parents, do you want your children to learn that a woman can have a penis? And I can assure you, do you want children to learn that a woman can have a penis? And I can assure you, people who look like you will agree
That
with
is
me,
not
Mr.
what those
Gilligan.
kids were being taught at those schools, and you know it.
My niece and nephew was there, and my nephew was sent a book home, and the book's name was The Princess Boy, a book that would suggest a transgender lifestyle being acceptable by somebody like from a Jewish faith, like somebody from a Christian faith. Why would I not want my children to learn about diverse society? Absolutely. I want our children to learn about the diverse society that exists here, but without infringing on any protected characteristic. I would not ask a non-Muslim person to verbally and morally affirm that Islam is the most divine religion and Prophet, peace be upon him, is the last messenger. The same way they should not get Muslims to verbally and morally affirm, which they were, Mr. Gilligan, that being gay is okay.
I want to ask you, Shakeel, about, so in your case, you think that you're stating that you have views in local politics, and then you have national views as well. Why is your religion so important to your politics? In lots of cases, we live in a secular world. Why does being Muslim matter so much?
It's not so much about being Muslim, it's about being from the Abrahamic faith of Judaism, of Christianity, and Islam. And of the Abrahamic faith, we are clearly taught that to fight for your rights. If you are being misrepresented, don't just sit there with your head in the ground. Fight for those rights and advocate for the rights. And that's what we did. We stood in the mayoral election and we took 70,000 votes when they thought we wouldn't even take 1,000. When the general election came, me and my colleagues, we came second in our respective constituencies with just 1 year of political experience and, on a shoestring budget. We've again demonstrated the third time round and caused a political earthquake because it's not about Muslim. The Labour Party in Birmingham, and I'm willing to challenge both of you to take a walk around the city of Birmingham with me, and you pose the question, I'll ask the question, and you will see that the people of Birmingham are disgruntled with the Labour Party. It's, and actually not only the Labour Party, all mainstream parties. It was the Labour Party leader who said that the Palestinians should be starved of water, electricity, and food. People care about that. People on the ground who are having to watch a genocide take place in front of their eyes care more about that than rubbish on the side of the road. And look, we all want to do stuff for our local area. That's why we've put local councillors in, and we've specifically told them concentrate on local issues, not leave national issues to the members of parliament, which we will be in 2029, and we will be advocating, like my dear brother Ayub Khan. Nobody can argue, and Birmingham respects Ayub Khan because Ayub Khan has gone in as an independent and he has said what the people want him to say. This is what we're forgetting. A councillor or an MP should be advocating first for the people who have voted him in and second for his party. If I was a Labour Party MP and my people said to me, Shakeel, we want you to say this and advocate for this, but the Labour whip was telling me not to, I would leave the party. I would stand by the people who have voted me in, not to protect my pocket.
Okay, so you said you decimated Labour in Birmingham. Of course, Labour did do pretty badly in Birmingham, but didn't actually lose all that many seats to you. I think of the independent candidate alliance, there's 13 independents on the council out of 101. But
and again, Mr. Gilligan, you really need to do your research better, because me and Ahmed on my social media, critically made a post stating that the Independent Candidate Alliance is an alliance between Ahmed Yaqub and Shakeel Afsar to support any and every independent. There are some independents are more aligned with us because they needed more assistance financially, physically, voluntarily for volunteers. But let me finish. Let me We have also we have since 2024, Mr. Gilligan. There was prior to 2024, there was no independent movement. After 2024, the independent movement that we created when we took a landslide amount of 70,000 votes, and you can see it replicating. We don't support just 6 candidates. We support anyone who stands independent, whether they're in Newham, whether they're in Redbridge, whether they're in Bradford, or whether they're in Walsall. Anyone who's independent, we are with them.
Sure, but I reckon that you only got a handful of candidates elected, and some of the ones that you actually put most effort into, including Shahid Bhatt, convicted terrorist in Sparkhill, he was beaten by Labour. You did a video saying Sparkhill is ours, and I'm afraid Sparkhill wasn't yours. Sparkhill is the...
Well, look. In any political movement, everybody will motivate the people. The fact that the Labour candidate in Sparkhill is actually my relative, he's my uncle. So that should tell you everything. That should tell you everything. That the fact that, but some Labour councillors, I have to give them credit. Not only in Sparkhill, some Labour councillors have been thrown under the bus by Labour Party because they are actually good councillors who work for their communities. So many of my relatives came up to me and said, look, we don't support Labour, but Mr. Rashid is a very good councillor because he does our work. So I said to them, vote wherever you vote. And look, Shahid, but our movement is on, you're pointing out our losses. Why don't we point out our wins? That with the movement that we've done, there's 13, 14 independents who have come to fruition. And we hope that they do right by the people.
I don't want it to be too focused on Birmingham local politics. So I think what I want to understand from you, Shakeel, as well, is a little bit about how involved your movement and your beliefs are with the Green Party, because it has been a very significant party with the Muslim vote, but actually, based off your background, what you've campaigned for with LGBT in schools, I think sometimes your views probably don't align. So are you faced with that issue every day with...
So I'll tell you what our issue is with the Green Party, is that they are pandering to Muslim vote without actually clarifying their policies. The fact that the Green Party believe that a woman can have a penis, but they're not, when they're advocating outside masjids and mosques, they're not actually telling their people that. We have no problem with the Green Party and for them to advocate their cause, but they must not do it under malice. They must be telling people, this is what our policies are, this is what we're doing. Unfortunately, there are people within the Green Party who I personally know from Birmingham, for the likes of, like, for example, I'll give you, there are people who ride the wave. And what they do is when there's a political movement, there's certain people like Salma Yaqub, like her brother Farouk, who jump from party to party, misguiding our people. I'll give you an example. Sister Salma first started her political career in the Respect Party. She then left the Respect Party and joined the Labour Party. She then left the Labour Party and her brother was advocating for the Workers' Party. They then left the Workers' Party, they started advocating for the Your Party, and now they're currently advocating for the Green Party. So we understand this is what's happened. These waves come in our communities. Our communities obviously are suffering from the cost of living crisis. We've got child poverty. We've got, many parents who can't even just, meet the breadline of feeding their families. And then obviously they're misguided. They haven't got the time to research. So that's why our issue is with the Greens, that they've split. They're coming into inner city areas and splitting the vote deliberately. And we will challenge it every step of the way.
That's the issue here, guys, because you're worried you're going to be out-Palestined by the Greens. And you've called
no, not at all. Not at all. I can tell you not at all.
Drugs, sex, and degeneracy.
They want to strip the Church of England. I'm against that. Absolutely, I don't believe that the Green Party should be advocating for that. They want to defund Christian faith schools. I don't believe that. My niece and nephew was moved from Anderton Park School, which was a council-run school, to a Christian-run school, a Catholic-run school. So, your arguments, I understand what you've seen from the outside, but Mr. Gilligan, and to Spectator TV, I really would suggest come down on the ground, let's take a walk, and you will dispel so many of your arguments. The Green Party, unfortunately, is not advocating for inner city areas. There might be, even for example, outer city areas, they're pandering to a sort of left type leaning voter. and are not telling the center type voters, like Abrahamic faith people, that this is what you're going to get if you
And
vote the
Andrew, could
Greens.
you tell us a little bit about not just the Green Party, but the other areas of Muslim mobilization? There's, of course, your party. There's the Palestine vote, I believe.
Yeah, so we've got concentrations of Muslim independence in some of the big areas of Muslim population in Britain. So there's a group called for Blackburn with Darwin that's in Blackburn, where there's another of the MPs, of course, is a Muslim independent, Islamopopulist independent. There's a group in Kirklees in West Yorkshire. That's Huddersfield, Dewsbury, where there's another of the MPs. There's a handful in Birmingham, not as many as Shakeel would like to tell you, but there's a handful in Birmingham, and there's and there's a big concentration in East London. Look for Rahman, probably the pioneer Islamopopulist, if you like. He is the mayor of Tower Hamlets in East London. He's got 33 councillors in these last elections. So it's and you're seeing little clusters elsewhere, but those are the main places at the moment. Your party has basically been a bit of it was a bit of a dead loss, really. It was dead on arrival. The four independent Muslim MPs, it did all join your party at the beginning, but as you know, there was this massive split almost straight away between Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn, the two other MPs in your party, and basically all the independent Muslim MPs sided with Corbyn, and two of them now walked out of your party, and the other two, I think, are still officially in it, but they're not prioritising it. They're not describing themselves on the Parliament website either as members of your party. They're still describing themselves as independents on the parliamentary website. So they've kept their distance from your party.
And Shakeel, I think people who live in Britain typically want to put British values first, and I'm sure a lot of British Muslims would want to do that. Do you think if you're going to take this further, perhaps there's a lot of heavy rhetoric on Islam? I noticed in one of your videos you started speaking, I believe, in Urdu, because you were very emotional about the vote result. And actually, living in England, do you think that you would benefit from having a bit more of a British values, British culture, British priorities put first, rather than talking quite so much about what are the priorities for Muslims? Because, you know, in many cases, Muslims might feel British before they feel Muslim. That albeit that they are massively densely populated in these Muslim areas.
Yeah, well, look, it's actually historically the British way of life of going into somebody else's land and forcing them to speak and dress as you like. You know, we only seen that in the Asian subcontinent when the British establishment, found a boat and went over there. You know, they were forced to Indians who would dress up in turbans were forced to wear suits and speak English. So the fact that you mentioned about me talking in a room, I can remember it was the evening of when the count closed, and there was 99.9% Urdu speaking people in that room, some of which who would have served in the army, but their first language is not English. It's Mirpuri, because they come from the Pakistani/Kashmiri area. Look, I'm a very proud British Muslim, and I always say that I'm a British Muslim. I'm very proud. I believe that we should be allowed to live here, prosper here. But the funny thing is this: when Muslims do something, is Islamopopulist. When Muslims do something, is the Islamist. Aren't there not other organizations who are doing exactly the same thing, like the likes of Nigel Farage pandering to the white right-wing vote, or the fact that we have the Green Party who are pandering to the left-wing vote? The fact that when Muslims do it, everyone's up in arms with pitchforks, thinking that these guys are coming to take over the country. We're not, even though it was Britain who invaded the Asian subcontinent and left the mess behind. Because I come from Kashmir, I come from a place because of Britain that is still unresolved issue. The fact that the longest standing unresolved live United Nations resolution is the Kashmir one. So, for us to say it's not very British for me to be speaking in Asian language, well, I can tell you my forefathers who were at the blunt end and at the barrel of a gun of British soldiers when they invaded the Asian subcontinent and were forcing our mothers and sisters to dress in English. No one wants to speak about it then. I'm in a room with 99.9% people who first language is not English, and my conversation went half in English, and then I spoke half in Asian, so they all would understand. The same way, if I was in a room of white people, I would speak in English. I don't see where the problem is. And yes, we are very proud British people, even in regards to this flag hanging on lampposts. I believe I'm very proud of the British flag. And I believe that when we hang these flags up on, when it's a World Cup or when we're, when something's happening, it should be done, and I would be supportive. But when they're being hijacked by right-wing extremists like Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, and his cronies, and they're specifically targeting, people from my community, then I have a problem with it. We have a problem with the boats as well that are coming over with illegal migrants. We don't, it's as if it's suggested that Muslims are standing there advocating. We're absolutely not. And the Green Party, if you look at Muslims and Abrahamic faith people, we have conservative values. And if you look at the values of the Green Party, they're not very conservative.
So, I mean, one of the things that gives me a bit of pause about some of the stuff you're doing is that it is pretty out of line with the stuff that even Reform are saying. Of course, we're not defending Reform in this space. They've clearly, they had a racist councillor. They just the other day said that you should melt Nigerians down into poles. Nobody's defending that, but you can't say, you can't use the kind of whataboutery. Let's put a couple of your statements and Ahmed's statements to you. So Ahmed said that a woman in a niqab in a burqa is better than women going around naked on the streets. He called it women in sportswear an example of Western degeneracy.
Well, I think what he's referring to is like, it's like what we believe as ethnic and as British Muslims. What we believe is that women's rights are actually being sexualized. We believe that women are being used for, as sexualization tools, whether it's to get businesses or whether it's to do what. We believe that women are sacred, and we believe that women should be protected. The fact that, you're concerned with why we're saying women should be protected. Zach Polanski was on a stage dancing around with half-clad women and half-clad men. That's not very British. If you actually go back and look in the Victorian era, Mr. Gilligan, the women of Britain were actually dressing like the women of Muslim lands today. And I'm happy to send you footage of streets of Birmingham where women are wearing veils.
Yeah, but
that was
Andrew,
I do want to
take us back 200 years, do you? Is that
No, but hang on. I think I want to stay on the Muslim vote specifically, rather than Shakeel and Ahmed's views. Shakeel, just tell me a little bit about where you hope the future of the Muslim vote will head to, because you can't have Gaza as your key policy, and I don't think it seems like you think that.
I'll give you insight. Look, British Muslims want our country here to thrive. We don't want just our country to thrive. We want the country to thrive so we could thrive. The fact that we're being made out to be some individuals who are trying to, break, control. No, we're not. We are disenfranchised voters. We are people who were made politically homeless by mainstream parties, and now they're facing the brunt of it. In Birmingham, Labour controlled the city, Birmingham City Council, like I said, for over a decade. We had to get involved, not because we're coming from some sort of Islamic perspective. I'm not a religious scholar, and I have never said I'm here to advocate and only for Muslims. That's absolutely absurd. We advocate for anyone who feels disenfranchised and feels that the people who were elected to represent us are misrepresenting us. And this is, a question should arise. How come this is spreading like wildfire all up and down the UK? Why is it that we're having independence coming? Why is it that these communities, my communities, who indigenously would close their eyes and vote for Labour without even looking at a single policy? When it comes to our policies, we want to bring power back to the people. We believe that society should be a live and let live society. Because somebody says, I come from a Jewish faith and I can't agree with this, we shouldn't call them a homophobe. Or if somebody says, I don't believe going to the mosque and, I don't believe in the religion of Islam, we shouldn't call them Islamophobe. The fact that we're throwing these words around so loosely to target communities is what's put us in the first place. And what I would like going forward, when the Your Party was launched, yes, it was a glimpse of hope that potentially there would be an organization that would be a marketplace of views where we all could be and we could agree to disagree. But as Mr. Gilligan said, they kind of self-employed themselves before they even started. The fact that we currently are, this movement is going to grow, and you can quote me on this day and time that I've said to you. It's because we're being disenfranchised, and it's not only me. If you look at the reform is taking so many seats of these common normal 9 to 5 working men and women, is because they're disenfranchised. I believe that the Labour leaders at the top and other party leaders have lost complete sense of what's happening on the ground. They don't understand the ground reality, what's happening. And look, yes, I have 56% Muslims in my constituency that I'm going to be standing for as a member of parliament. But that does not mean that the other 40 odd percent that we would not advocating for, absolutely, we would be on the front line. And I challenge anybody. Or any statement. Our policies are going to be bringing power back to the people, and independent candidates are the most true form of democracy because they only answer to the people who voted them in and
Okay,
not to
and
political
lastly,
parties.
Andrew, to you, the Muslim population is growing at a faster rate than almost any other demographic in the UK. And based off your research, I want to understand: do you think Muslims will continue to vote as these blocks, or in this way with Islamopopulism, or do you expect this not to have as much longevity as perhaps Shakeel might believe?
So actually, I mean, I think Shaquille said, he's surfing this great wave or something, and actually, they really didn't do as well in Birmingham as they were expecting. They lost a couple of lots, quite a few key wards actually, and also we can see in other places like Redbridge, for instance, where the Islamo-populist candidate did extremely well at the general election. Redbridge, Labour pushed back. Labour did actually quite well in Redbridge, where Streeting's seat, and I think what's happening here is that there's a limit on this movement. That lots of voters, including lots and lots, hundreds of thousands, millions of Muslim voters, are seeing these people for who they are. They're seeing them that they are against the interests of the British people. They're against the interests of British Muslims. They would harm Britain's internal security and external security. They ignore most of the priorities of Muslims and almost all the priorities of non-Muslims, and they would increase tensions between Muslim and non-Muslim Brits. And I think Muslim voters, if Labour and the other mainstream parties are willing to push back against that, you can see that does work and these people can be contained.
I find it very strange how we're talking about Muslims reproducing quicker than any other community, or how Muslims should be contained. You use the word. That's absolutely absurd. It's not our fault that we Muslims believe in family values. We believe in starting up families at an early age, just like you used to. The British people at one point used to do this. It is not our fault. It is not our fault that you have left your churches empty to be converted to restaurants. It's not our fault that you only go to church on a Sunday, where we go to the mosque 5 times a day.
I didn't
That's
say
not our
Muslim
fault.
people could be contained. I said the Islamo-populist movement represented by shysters like you could be contained.
Yeah, no, I disagree. I think you need to do your research more on the ground rather than
All
sitting in
right,
the office. But
both of you,
anyway,
thank you very much for joining me on Spec TV.